No one expected tension when two of Hollywood's most adored personalities sat down for what was supposed to be a warm, light-hearted conversation. But what began as harmless chatter quickly twisted into one of the most uncomfortable moments daytime television has ever witnessed. The studio air felt welcoming as Valerie Bertinelli walked in, greeted by Drew Barrymore's signature enthusiasm. Drew rose with open arms, pulling Valerie into a hug that seemed sincere, and the audience responded with cheerful applause. For a moment, everything looked effortless to women who had lived parallel lives in the spotlight. Both familiar with fame, heartbreak, reinvention, and the pressure to remain likable. On paper, their exchange should have been easy. Drew settled into her seat, leaning forward with that bright, curious expression she always wears. She began by telling Valerie how genuinely inspiring her journey had been her divorce, her emotional honesty, her cookbooks, and her rediscovery of herself. Valerie smiled politely, though something guarded lingered in her eyes. Drew praised her authenticity, commending her willingness to show the good, the bad, and the messy. Valerie responded thoughtfully, explaining that after living in the spotlight for so long, she'd learned people appreciate honesty because life simply isn't perfect. But Drew paused, one of those subtle host pauses, signaling a pivot, and shifted into deeper territory. She brought up Valerie's history with body image, self-worth, and the feeling of never being enough. Valerie's expression tightened ever so slightly, but she answered with grace, acknowledging that the industry imposes impossible standards on women, and that those pressures inevitably become internalized. However, Drew pushed further, asking whether the pressure came from Hollywood or from Valerie herself, whether she was partly responsible for holding on to an unrealistic image from her sitcom days. The warmth on Valerie's face slowly faded. She explained that when you grow up being valued for how you look and how likable you are, the pressure isn't a choice, it's built into the environment. Still, Drew didn't back down. She questioned whether Valerie had created her own narrative about her life, wondering aloud if the story she's been sharing publicly was truly the whole truth. That was the moment everything shifted. Valerie straightened in her chair, her hands tightening on the armrests as she firmly clarified that her story is not a narrative, it is her actual lived experience. Drew tried to soften her approach, suggesting that pain can distort memory and that distance might change how someone views their past. But the emotional shift had already taken hold. The warmth between them evaporated, leaving behind a silence heavy with discomfort. What should have been a heartfelt, uplifting conversation had quietly transformed into an unexpected confrontation. One neither Valerie nor Drew saw coming. The tension in the room becomes unmistakable. The audience, sensing the shift, falls silent as the warmth between the two women evaporates. Valerie's voice is steady but firm when she finally speaks. She tells Drew that after years of therapy and deep personal work, she knows exactly what happened to her and how it shaped her life. What she doesn't appreciate, she adds, is the implication that she's misremembering or exaggerating her own trauma. Drew's eyes widen and her hands rise in a defensive gesture as she insists she isn't saying that at all. She claims she's simply trying to explore how people process pain and tell their stories. But when Valerie sharply reminds her that she didn't come on the show to be analyzed, only to talk about her new cookbook and the life she's building now, the air grows heavier. Drew tries to soothe the moment, but her expression reveals she still wants to push the discussion further. She asks if she can add one more thing, and when Valerie reluctantly allows it, Drew begins to explain her own past, the addiction, the childhood wounds, the family chaos. She says that sometimes people cling to their pain because it becomes part of their identity, and gently suggests that maybe Valerie has held on longer than necessary. The silence that follows is thick. Valerie stares at Drew, disbelief and anger warring across her face. Drew senses the shift, but continues anyway, pointing out how Valerie has spoken repeatedly about the same struggles: her divorce, her body image issues, her self-worth, and suggests it might be time to let go. Valerie's voice turns cold as she tells Drew she has no right to dictate the timeline of her healing or suggest. She is dragging the past behind her unnecessarily. Everyone heals differently, she says. And the idea that Drew thinks she can define Valerie's process is deeply presumptuous. Drew protests, her voice rising, insisting she's only asking questions, that this show is built on real conversations. But Valerie doesn't back down. Real conversations require respect. She reminds her, and Drew's approach does not feel respectful. She accuses Drew of sitting in judgment and hiding behind curiosity, insisting that Drew seems to think she understands Valerie's pain better than Valerie herself does. Drew flushes, denying this, and tries again to explain that public figures sometimes fall into patterns because it's what audiences expect. She wonders aloud if Valerie feels trapped by that pressure. Valerie acknowledges the pressure, but pushes back harder. Pressure, she says, doesn't make her trauma any less real, nor does it mean she's performing it for attention. Her tone sharpens as she lays out the truth. These events happened to her, shaped her, and she has every right to speak about them whenever and however she chooses. Drew's tone shifts again, now sounding hurt. She accuses Valerie of being overly defensive and insists she's always been on Valerie's side. She just wanted an honest, meaningful moment between them. But Valerie isn't moved. If Drew wanted an honest conversation, she says, she would listen instead of forcing her own interpretations onto Valerie's experiences. Just because Drew healed a certain way doesn't make it the template for everyone else. Drew pushes back, trembling now, insisting she's trying to connect. She thought they could create something real together, but Valerie is acting like she's being attacked. Valerie lets out a humorless laugh and reminds her that Drew literally told her she was clinging to her pain for identity. How could that not feel like an attack? Drew insists she said it with love. She says it because she cares, because she sees Valerie struggling, because she wants her to be free. But Valerie's voice cuts clean through the room as she declares that she is free and she doesn't need Drew to save her. What she needs is respect and space to define her own healing. The audience sits frozen as the tension thickens. Somewhere behind the cameras, a producer is surely panicking, trying to figure out how to salvage this moment. Drew tries once more, apologizing if she upset Valerie. She says she admires her deeply and only wanted a deeper conversation. Valerie's response is clipped but controlled. Deeper conversation is welcome, but interrogation is not. What Drew is doing, Valerie insists, is questioning her choices, her process, her truth. And that is the exact kind of pressure that keeps women stuck being told they're too emotional, too sensitive, too slow to recover, too unwilling to let go. Drew tries to deny it, but Valerie stops her. Intent doesn't erase impact, she says. And the fact that Drew refuses to acknowledge the hurt she's caused speaks volumes about the imbalance in their conversation. By now, the divide between them is undeniable. The room is silent, and the conversation that was supposed to be warm and empowering has turned into a raw, painful confrontation that neither woman saw coming. Drew's eyes are glassy now, her voice cracking as she insists she only wanted to help, that she hoped they could connect through shared experiences. But Valerie responds gently, firmly, reminding her that their experiences are not the same, and that it's unfair to use one woman's healing as the standard by which another should be measured. For a moment, Drew seems to understand, nodding slowly, quietly. Then she pushes again, saying she still believes Valerie is missing something, that there must be a reason she's reacting so strongly. Valerie's eyes widen in disbelief. Drew presses on, suggesting that if Valerie weren't holding on to something unresolved, she wouldn't be so triggered. Asterisk, that's the breaking point. Valerie rises from her chair, her voice steady despite the anger pulsing beneath it. She tells Drew there is nothing left to talk about, because Drew isn't listening, she's diagnosing. She refuses to sit there and be told that her reaction to disrespect is somehow proof that she is the problem. Drew jumps up, reaching toward her, begging her not to leave and insisting that walking away only proves her point. Valerie turns back, incredulous. She isn't running, she says. She's setting a boundary, one she has every right to set. She refuses to be psychoanalyzed by someone acting as though they have all the answers. Drew's voice breaks as she insists she doesn't think she knows everything, that she just wants them to learn from each other. If only Valerie would be open. But Valerie has been open. She fires back, patient, even. Yet every time she expresses discomfort, Drew labels her as defensive or triggered. Doesn't Drew realize how manipulative that is? The word lands hard, hanging in the air like an explosion. Drew goes pale, shaken, insisting she isn't being manipulative. She's being honest, vulnerable. Valerie doesn't relent. Using vulnerability as a shield while undermining someone else's truth, she says, is manipulation whether Drew sees it or not. Asterisk. Drew's hands shake as tears fill her eyes. She says she can't believe Valerie would accuse her like this, especially after being invited onto the show and supported. But Valerie's voice rises, sharply. Support doesn't count if it comes with conditions or with the expectation that she will process her trauma on Drew's terms. Drew protests that there were no conditions, that she only wanted a deep, real conversation, the kind she always has. Valerie counters that maybe not every conversation needs to plunge into someone's psyche. Sometimes people just want to be heard, not dissected. Sometimes the kindest thing is to accept a person's words without digging for hidden wounds. Asterisk. Drew wipes at tears, smearing her makeup, insisting that she's a talk show host. This is her job. Valerie reminds her that she came there to talk about her work and her present life, not to become Drew's therapy project. And, she adds, if Drew truly believes this is what a real conversation looks like, that's deeply concerning. The audience watches like spectators to a slow-motion disaster, some whispering, some filming despite the rules. This moment is going to live far beyond the studio walls. Asterisk. Drew steps closer, voice pleading now, begging Valerie to sit down and start over. She wants to fix it, but Valerie shakes her head. Starting over won't fix anything. Respect and acknowledgement will. Drew needs to admit she overstepped, that she doesn't know what's best for Valerie, and accept that Valerie is the expert on her own experience. Drew swears she respects that, but still insists that growth comes from being challenged. Valerie shakes her head again. There's a difference between challenging someone and belittling them, she says, and what Drew has done today suggesting. She's stuck, clinging to pain, reacting because of some unresolved issues, belittling, not challenging. Asterisk. Drew denies judging her, her own frustration rising. She's tired of people accusing her of judgment when she's trying to connect, when she puts herself out there every day. Valerie cuts in sharply. This isn't about Drew's feelings. It's about how Drew has treated her. But, she adds bitterly, of course Drew is making it about herself now, casting herself as the victim. Drew is stunned, insisting she isn't playing victim, but defending herself. Valerie insists she isn't attacking, she's holding Drew accountable. But Drew has grown so accustomed to praise and admiration, Valerie says, that she can't handle being called out. Asterisk. The energy shifts. Both women now feel attacked. Drew's voice turns tight as she tells Valerie that maybe she did overstep. Maybe Valerie is so defensive about her past that she can't handle even mild questioning. Maybe she's built her entire identity around being a victim, and that's why she's threatened by the conversation. The audience gasps. Even Drew seems shocked by her own words, hand flying to her mouth as she whispers an apology. But it's too late. Valerie's face goes cold. She tells Drew she absolutely meant what she said and that this moment is the perfect example of everything she's been trying to explain. Asterisk. The moment the words slipped out of Drew's mouth, Valerie froze. It was as if everything Drew had been skirting around, every implied judgment, every veiled critique had finally surfaced. "You've been thinking that this entire time," Valerie said, her voice trembling with controlled fury. "And now it's finally come out. You think I'm playing victim? You think I've turned my trauma into my identity? And instead of having the courage to say that from the beginning, you danced around it pretending to be concerned, pretending to care." Drew's face cracked with panic as she insisted she cared deeply, but Valerie shut her down instantly. "If you cared, you wouldn't have said what you just said." Drew reached out again, her hand shaking, begging Valerie to sit, to talk like adults. Valerie's laugh came out sharp and pained. Adults don't say horrible things and then act like an apology erases them. "You said on national television that you think I've built my identity around being a victim. Do you understand how damaging that is?" Drew whispered that she was upset, that she had lashed out because she felt attacked, but Valerie had already seen too much. "Your mistake revealed what you really think about me," she said. "I can't unhear that." Asterisk. Drew grew frustrated, saying she had tried to be gentle, tried to understand. But Valerie countered that gentleness wasn't what Drew had offered. It was passive aggression wrapped in faux concern. If Drew had a problem with the way she shared her story, she should have said it directly instead of disguising judgment as curiosity. Drew insisted she just wanted to connect, but Valerie told her plainly that what was meant to be a simple, positive conversation had turned into an interrogation about her trauma. Drew threw her hands up, claiming everything she said was being twisted, that Valerie was determined to see her as the enemy. Valerie replied that she hadn't walked in seeing Drew that way, but Drew's behavior had revealed exactly who she is. Was someone who believed her way was the only way? Someone who couldn't handle being contradicted? Someone who defended her own missteps with the same cruelty she claimed to be above. Asterisk. When Valerie finally stood to leave, Drew's shock turned into desperation. "So that's it. You're going to walk out and make me look like the bad guy?" Valerie turned back, calm and chillingly clear. "Drew, you made yourself look like the bad guy. I'm just refusing to participate in it anymore." And that, she added, was proven by Drew's concern about appearances instead of the harm she had caused. Drew protested that she cared about Valerie's feelings, but also had a show to protect her reputation, her audience, yet Valerie reminded her she should have considered those consequences before attacking her guest. Drew asked what she could do to fix it, but Valerie told her nothing could be done now. Maybe someday, after real reflection, there could be a conversation, but not today. Asterisk. Drew's final plea: "Please don't make this a thing. We can just talk about your cookbook," was met with a firm shake of Valerie's head. "You can't unring a bell. I won't sit here and pretend everything's fine after you told the world you think I'm a professional victim." Drew insisted she never said those exact words, but Valerie told her the meaning was unmistakable, and Drew's attempts to technically correct herself only proved she didn't understand. She wasn't sorry for what she said, only sorry that Valerie hadn't absorbed it quietly. Asterisk. The audience sat frozen as Valerie steadied herself and delivered her final words. She had come in good faith, expecting a warm, supportive conversation. Instead, she got judgment disguised as curiosity and cruelty disguised as honesty. She told Drew she hoped she would learn from this, hoped she would examine why her attempts at connection made people feel small rather than seen. Then Valerie turned and walked off stage, each step echoing through the stunned silence. Drew stood alone, tears streaming down her face, staring after the empty space where Valerie had vanished. She looked at her audience, at her crew, at her trembling hands, lost, devastated, and unable to understand how the conversation had unraveled so completely. The producer hurried to her side, whispering instructions, but Drew barely moved, her expression blank with the shock of a moment she couldn't undo. Asterisk.